This week I will be discussing the 1996 TV movie The Babysitter, Seduction, starring Keri Russell as an 18-year-old babysitter and Stephen Collins as a rich father and also husband of a woman who turns up dead from an alleged suicide on the kitchen floor one day. The actress who played Mrs. Huxtable in The Cosby Show plays a detective working the case. But before I discuss this movie, please feel free to stalk my channel the way a devious Stephen Collins might stalk a clueless babysitter. This was probably the first time I saw Stephen Collins play a bad guy, but I now know he's played a bad guy in other TV movies, and in real life, as we've since learned. The music at the beginning of the movie sounds a little Egyptian, kind of like Dravidian Dithyramb, which I sang in chorus in high school. Or like the Oil Ocean Zone music in the video game Sonic 2. It fits the mood. Babysitters were really big in the 90s. Gen X and older millennials like to brag that babysitters didn't exist when they were kids, but that's bull. The Freaking Babysitters Club came out in the 80s and was hugely popular when I was a kid in the early 90s. R.L. Stine wrote a saga called The Babysitter, which consisted of 4 books and was about a teen girl named Jenny who dealt with all kinds of ghoulish crap while looking after the kids in town. And then there was the Alicia Silverstone movie, The Babysitter. I don't know what the heck that movie was about, but yeah, there were a lot of movies and books about babysitters back in the day, and here was another one. Keri Russell plays Michelle. As mentioned earlier, she's an 18-year-old senior getting ready for homecoming. I'm pretty sure she said she was 18, but I might be misremembering. Way too many of these movies where older men seduce seniors in high school. I might be confusing this one with Lying Eyes or something, and I don't feel like rewatching the whole movie a second time just to confirm if he's really a statutory rapist or just a non-statutory rapist murderous loser. She's invited her boyfriend to pass the time with her while babysitting the little girl and boy. That's not good. She should be paying attention to the kids. I know they're sleeping, but still, she's outside swimming in the pool with her boyfriend and fake drowning just to scare him. And meanwhile, there could be some maniac sneaking up the stairs and into the children's rooms. Don't worry, the kids don't get abducted, but this is a babysitter movie, so you can't assume anything like that is off the table. A little later, Michelle is standing in the parents' walk-in closet and asks her boyfriend what he thinks of the dress she's wearing, and he's so predictable. He says he'd rather she wore nothing. Yeah, didn't see that one-liner coming, har har. The husband and wife arrive home, but only the wife comes inside, while the husband, Bill, stays in the car. For those who are Gen Z or younger, I don't know if this is a thing anymore, but it used to be that the husband of the family would drive the young female babysitter home. This just feels like a recipe for disaster, but maybe I've been watching way too much Lifetime. She tells Bill she's a senior in high school. Old enough, he's probably thinking. This guy is such a... Now he's talking to a friend of his named Frank. He's telling Frank that his wife, Sally, has been in a bad mood lately, setting the stage for something more sinister to come, perhaps. Never has a husband complained about his depressed wife in a TV movie without her later ending up dead of a suspicious suicide, am I right? Oh, and they're trying to have a baby. Is that a euphemism? I'm thinking it's a euphemism. This woman isn't going to live long enough for that. They already have 2 kids, a boy and a girl named Kyle and Jennifer, so from those names alone, you know this is a 90s movie. The fact that it stars Stephen Collins means it's obviously a made-for-TV movie. Now it's Sally's birthday, and Bill's gift to her is a new car, which she just shrugs off, lending credibility to this theory that she's depressed. Now we skip ahead to a new day, and the kiddos have tennis lessons, and then music lessons afterward, and the mother gives Michelle a very simple task. Remember to take the sheet music with her, but what do you know? Michelle forgets. So she has to come back to the house while the kids are having their tennis lessons, and she stumbles across Sally's dead body. Now the main conflict begins. What happened to Sally Bartrand? From the looks of it, it was a suicide, and since Bill did tell Frank earlier that Sally was depressed lately, it fits. Maybe a little too well. It just occurred to me that if Michelle hadn't come home for the sheet music, she maybe wouldn't have found the body until she arrived there later with the children. Good thing the children didn't walk in on that. Did they contrive this whole scenario of the forgotten sheet music just so they could spare the children the agony of finding their dead mother? I'm really not sure why it was necessary for her to return for the sheet music, but whatever. The detective working the case is named Kate Jacobs, and she is of course the actress who played Mrs. Huxtable on The Cosby Show, Felicia Rashad. The name Kate Jacobs Sounds like it belongs in some book serial about a female detective. The Kate Jacobs series. Can't you just picture it? Bill is an emotional wreck, playing the part of the grieving husband, but we already know based on the title that he probably did it. Here's yet another example of a TV movie title that gives away the entire plot. Michelle tells Detective Jacobs that Bill and Sally never fought. In fact, they were just perfect in every way. As far as the target for seduction, she's a good one because she's clearly delusional. So apparently Frank and Bill have been friends for the past 20 plus years. They played football in high school. No way do they look 40. I'm in my early 40s. I do not look that old. Sorry. I want to add that Frank looks like a red-haired John Cusack. An antidepressant is found in Sally's system during the autopsy, and a man named Paul Richards comes forward, claiming to be her lover. He says Sally was going to leave Bill for him. Yeah, that's what they all say. So now there are 3 possible suspects. Bill, Paul, and Michelle, though I think we could safely say it's not Michelle, because this girl doesn't give off a criminal mastermind vibe. She's a total homecoming-obsessed flake, who's about to be seduced by the real killer, whom we already know is Bill from the title alone. He's the only person so far who's made any kind of attempt to seduce her. Michelle's friends want to know what it was like to stumble across a murder scene. They're so gross. Her boyfriend doesn't want her babysitting for this guy's kids anymore, but it's only a few minutes into the movie, so we already know she won't be listening to him. She responds to her boyfriend's concerns by scheduling a date with Bill at a nice restaurant. Bill tells her to call him by his first name because Mr. Bartrand was the name of his father. She's already been working for him for some time. I would have thought they would have gotten those kind of housekeeping matters out of the way long ago. He tells her that he needs her help with the kids, and she's eager to be of help. He hands Michelle the keys to Sally's new car, the one his wife didn't seem to care for and apparently shot herself to avoid having to drive. It's a dead car, and Michelle is over the moon about it. The explanation he gives her is that it's a safer vehicle to drive his kids around in. Fine, that's great, but why does Michelle get to drive it home and act like it's her car now? Her friend Tracy thinks it's rad, but her boyfriend doesn't like what's going on here. Neither does her mother, though she's willing to look the other way if it means someone else can now drive the younger brother to school. Detective Jacobs is now talking to Frank and telling him that Sally didn't have gun residue on her hands, so that pretty much eliminates the possibility of suicide. Frank brings up Michelle as a possible suspect to Bill. Maybe Sally caught the teen stealing, and Michelle overreacted. Frank lets Bill know he can't afford to be too trusting. The lover, Paul, says that Sally's husband was controlling and she was scared of him, pretty much confirming that he's the guy who did it. Is this movie over yet? Nope. Paul has a faulty alibi, so we're going to drag this on for a bit and pretend he could be the one who did it. Paul starts doing some snooping around on Bill. I don't know what kind of dirt he expects to find on him, and I don't care, but it apparently involves searching through computer files. Kate decides to stop by Michelle's high school and let her know that Sally's case is now being investigated as a homicide. Michelle is horrified. Her acting is really bad here. If I didn't know for a fact that she couldn't have done it, I might find myself suspecting her based on that awful acting alone. Michelle goes to Bill's office and tells him that she has to quit because she didn't sign up for this. She's not babysitting in a murder house. He's like, poor girl, nobody thinks this is a murder, just crazy Detective Jacobs. You could trust me. Clearly, Michelle hasn't stopped to consider that if this really was a murder, the husband would be the primary suspect, so of course he's going to say that. Of course he's not concerned about her or the children's safety at this point, because he did it. Duh. He tells her that they should have a nice little talk later over dinner, and she's like, that sounds wonderful. At this point, I'd be worried about arsenic. I hope he doesn't plan on serving her powdered donuts. She makes dinner for him later at his house, but he shows up with another woman and is like, sorry, I forgot. So Michelle goes upstairs to cry in his room, as though she lives there now. And then she goes into the closet and tries on a necklace and black dress that belonged to Sally. Bill comes up behind her, and she thinks he's going to be mad, but instead he compliments her, apologizes for being insensitive earlier, and they kiss. Ew. But they don't go all the way. He eventually stops the kiss and tells her he's made a mistake. Now he's telling Frank that Michelle was raiding his wife's closet, so he's clearly not on her side. Meanwhile, he's still pretending to Michelle that they're friends and gives her the task of interviewing potential housekeepers. Her mother thinks this is weird. Michelle is still a teen, but Michelle thinks she's the perfect person to make such an adult decision on Bill's behalf because that's what a dumb 18-year-old would think when she's head over heels for an older guy. Little Kyle opens the door to Paul Richards, who is pretending to be a male housekeeper. Somehow, he sneaks off to Bill's office without anyone realizing and tries to get into the computer. Michelle catches him in the act and she throws him out. Bill pretends to make an angry call to someone about getting a restraining order on the guy, but it's a fake call for Michelle's sake because she's listening in the other room. Now Bill decides it's time to pay Paul Richards a little visit. I won't spoil for you what happens during this visit. Suffice it to say, Paul has now become a missing person. Michelle and Bill finally hook up. Michelle blabs to her friend Tracy, but she doesn't go so far as to say that she's doing the deed with Bill, but it's very much implied, even as she denies it. Her friend thinks this is gross and wants no part of it. Frank talks to Michelle later. He clearly suspects her because he's not ready to admit that his good friend is a wife killer. Michelle's mother asks her where she got this new necklace she's wearing. She finds out it's from Bill and confronts him. The mother is like, "Sorry, not sorry, your wife is dead. Get a new babysitter and leave my daughter alone." But guess what Bill doesn't do? Leave Michelle alone. He tells her he wants her help cleaning out his wife's stuff. Michelle is like, "What about your kids' feelings on the matter?" He basically says, "F the kids." Well, not actually saying that, but we all know that's the sentiment behind the words. Frank is now following Michelle, apparently. He spots her wearing Sally's sweater outside while he's driving by, and he calls her on it. She tells Bill that Frank is bothering her. Bill tells her Frank's just having a hard time accepting the fact that he loves her now and not Sally. A likely story. When talking with Frank, on the other hand, he's telling his good friend that Michelle is a problem and she's been stealing and throwing away Sally's things. He conveniently leaves out the part he played in this little bit of spring cleaning. Michelle has no clue all of this is going on behind her back, of course. She's asking her mother if she could spend the weekend with her friend Tracy, but of course, she's really planning to spend the weekend with Mr. Bill Bartrand. Soon after, Kate meets up with Michelle and lets her know what Frank is saying, that she's a thief. Michelle is like, "No, he's lying." And Kate is like, "Why would Frank lie about that? I think Bill is the one who is lying to him." And so 18-year-old Michelle is starting to have doubts about this older widower she thought she loved. Bill starts to realize that he's now Kate's lead suspect, so he decides to pay her a little visit. I won't spoil what happens to her. Michelle slowly begins to accept the fact that her lover is a wife killer, and so she responds to this realization by doing the only logical thing, entering his house while making the assumption he's not at home and searching his computer. While she's on his computer, he comes up behind her and launches into what I have come to call the psycho death rant. It's when the killer has cornered the main girl, launches into this whole sad story thinking he's about to kill her anyway, but somehow the main girl manages to outsmart him. So the final showdown begins. He binds her hands and sticks her into a personal home elevator of some kind that she is easily able to climb out of by standing up. Don't ask me how that's possible. I do not understand the logistics of this. All the while, Bill is calling up Frank to let him know that the evil babysitter is trapped in his house and to come arrest her, please. By the way, I guess his friend Frank is also a police officer. Michelle does eventually do the smart thing of running downstairs and trying to go out the front door, but it's locked, and so she has no choice but to run back upstairs. And really, who are we to judge someone in that situation for making the choice to escape their attacker by running upstairs? Isn't that essentially just blaming the victim? So yes, she runs upstairs and ends up trapped on the roof and has to make the decision to save herself by jumping off the roof and into the pool. Somehow, the momentum of that long fall doesn't cause her to smash her head open. She does a dead man's float in order to fool Mr. Bartrand, just like she did earlier with her boyfriend at the beginning of the movie. So, there you go. That's the relevance of that earlier prank. She's apparently very good at playing dead. While Bill's attempting to drag her body out of the pool, she makes a surprise attack on him. They struggle for a bit, and it looks like he's managed to drown her. But no, she manages to stab him with his own knife just when he thinks she's down for the count. And Frank shows up and tells her to drop the knife. And at first we think that Frank is going to arrest her. But no, turns out he is quite aware who the real villain is, which is very strange since Michelle is the one guilty of breaking and entering. I mean, I know Bill is the bad guy who tried to kill her, but she broke into his house first. So from a purely legal standpoint, without knowing all of the facts, she's the most likely suspect. And yet, the arrest of Bill is very much uncomplicated by those kinds of small details. And Michelle pulls a Titanic at the end as she rips off her necklace that Bill gave her and tosses it into the pool. Titanic actually came out a year after this movie, so I suspect that it was Titanic that was stealing from the Babysitter Seduction, but please let me know in the comments what you think.